Welcome, everyone. Today's Town Hall 124. It's Wednesday, October 23rd, and I'm excited for this one. I've got some information, and honestly, I'm not excited for the reason we're having it, but I think it's going to be useful for everyone, and I think there may be more to that. So I want to take a minute and thank Glenn as well, who really spent a lot of time helping us out to really get some details. So without further ado, let's move on and we'll do some introductions. Is Mike going to be here today, Madison? Do we know?
I think he's still on his Eternal Roadshow.
I think he is as well.
Yeah, I'm
So,
not sure. Usually he lets me know whether he's going to be here or not, but I didn't hear from him this time. So,
well, if he shows up, we will welcome him. And in the meantime, I'll just introduce him either way. So, hello, my name's John Best. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Best Innovation Group. We like to do cool things for credit unions. Lately, it's been a lot of this fraud, which we're going to talk about today, helping with that, helping sort of unravel what's happened and protect against it in the future. Kind of less about security and more about sort of, when I say security, I mean cybersecurity, more about sort of dealing with, the outcomes of it, as well as mergers and a lot of other stuff. So if you want to check it out, go to big-fintech.com. And then usually my other co-host is Mr. Michael Lawson. Mike Lawson, he's the creator and host of CU Broadcast, which discusses all kinds of things. I don't know, Glenn. I don't know how he does it. He has so many videos out there. It's just so impressive. And if you want to know what's going on, that's the place to be. Normally Mikey's with us, but not today, which leads us to my actual current guest co-host, also co-host of the Big Cast, and a great friend of the entire grading community and a personal friend of myself, Glenn Servati. Hi, Glenn.
Hi there. I asked for this to be taken out. I did not think of myself as a guest host today, but happy to contribute wherever.
Yeah, you're not a guest host. You're the actual other host, and we probably just need to add you to that other slide, which maybe Madison will do for us.
that may have been my fault. Jackie took it out and I put it back on.
That's okay.
We got to have Glenn.
Just kidding.
We got to have Glenn. So anyways, Glenn is the managing principal at 154 Advisors, which he's a former worker of the Fed. He's worked at CheckFree. He's forgotten more about payments than any of us will ever know. And on top of that, he's just a really good person. So if you need any work like that, I just couldn't recommend a better person. He will score a touchdown for you every time in those areas. Speaking of scoring touchdowns, let's talk about our sponsors. All right, so CUNA Councils, America's Credit Union, is one of our big sponsors, and we're super excited that ever since they've kind of moved into their new role, they're continuing on with us. I had a great time hosting the CUNA CEO Council last month. It went really well, and all I can say is this: if you are in this industry, well, one, if you've been in this industry a while, you already know about their consortiums and their councils. And they have one for everything: lending, ops, tech, marketing, you name it, they have it. And it's a great place to really go and become inspired, to learn what's going on, to be able to connect with others in the same position as you. And one of the most valuable things of our industry is the fact that we share. So it's just a great place to go and get that information. And also, which is pretty exciting, they are also pushing hard on a lot of the regulatory stuff. As a matter of fact, Glenn, I think the previous episode we talked about Illinois and what was going on in Illinois. You brought on the gentleman from the Illinois Credit Union. What's that?
Tom Kane from the Illinois Credit Union League. Exactly.
Yeah. And, CUNA's right in the middle of that too. I mean, anything that has to do with sort of lobbying and being part of that, America's Credit Union is there, the ACU. And so check them out, go to their website. There's a lot to know. Then there's Illuma.
Speaking of which, if I can just add to the regulatory side of things, I have not heard what America's Credit Unions is doing on this just yet. I've been working with them going back to when the original rule was proposed. If you haven't seen, the CFPB put out their final open banking rule just yesterday.
Yeah.
All 594 pages of it. And I have
Yeah, I was gonna stick that into ChatGPT and pull out some summaries because I do want to
Ooh,
talk about that at our upcoming IC conference.
I would be very curious to see how ChatGPT summarized that. I'm looking at it, and I'll be writing a blog. Hopefully, be up by early next week. There's a lot more to that. I mean, the short version is credit unions actually got, I think, a little bit of relief, but I would not get too comfortable. Is the way.
Well, you know, it's funny because I was having a conversation about that with Malind, which is what a great see how I did that. My
Get us back on
segue.
track.
Yeah. So I was having a conversation with that. So Glenn Sarvati is also the co-host of the podcast called The Big Cast, which you can find anywhere that you can find podcasts. And we have close to 500-600 episodes out there. And one of the things Glenn does is he regularly attends the Finnovates and things like that, and he brings back the results. And Malind's here, which is exciting. Maybe he'll I know he was had some stuff to do, so he was going to continue try to dial in. But Malind, you guys finally won, and what an impressive win! So you want to Malind, by the way, is the CEO of Illuma, and someone I had the pleasure to meet very early on in this company. You know, he was at one of our innovation clubs and has gone on to just do incredible things in our industry. But Malind, you want to talk a little bit about that?
It would say 10 times the charm or something like that, right? But no, it's an awesome event. I've gotten to know Glenn multiple times over that event, and it's exciting to see that there was finally recognition for some of our latest innovations. You know, it's sad that it picks up when fraud has really gone up and gone on, you know, up in attention everywhere. Just, you know, I'm very excited about this particular town hall to hear what everyone else is facing, and you know, we're continuing to invest to improve our technology, and you know, excited to be here.
And Malind, I know you're going to help by getting involved in this discussion. So I'm thankful for you to take the time to join us today. And you know, speaking of fraud, you know, one of the things that's been happening pretty quickly to a lot of credit unions is FedNow and the payments platforms, because there's so many, right, Glenn? There's the real-time payments, there's the FedNow payments, there's same day ACH, and so forth and so on. And every time,
as I always have heard it said, a faster getaway car, faster fraud too.
Yeah, yeah, and one thing that I was very impressed with our partner Typhone is they really spent a long time working on their Zelle offering, on their real-time payments offering. And they've got really, really good controls in place, because I've seen more than one credit union who rolled this out and almost immediately rolled it right back because there were immediate fraud. And we're going to talk about that today. It's going to be our number one thing, but I was very impressed with where they were going with it, how they had built in the AI solutions and you know, to put these things in place. So if you haven't checked them out, they're really more than a home banking company now. They're looking they're being disruptive in a way I haven't seen in a while, particularly around AI and whatnot. So go check out typhone.com. And so that's our sponsors. We'll move on here to the next slide. So today's giveaways is going to be $100 gift card of your choice. So if you would like to win whatever $100 that you want, what you need to do is you got to put your name and your credit union and your email, I think, into the chat. Now, here's the news. We're not doing anything with any of this information. And that's because we already have your email or you wouldn't be here. So, and if we don't, we're not adding it to our list. This is the only purpose for this is to get you some free stuff for showing up, which we really appreciate when you become interactive. And so it's a way to do that. And the people who realized that this was a good thing to do was the William Mills Agency, someone, Glenn, I know you're very familiar with and do a lot of work for.
You know them well.
Yeah, you want to talk about them just for a sec?
I see Amber on the call as well. I was just thumbing through the frames of who's there, but William Mills has a wonderful reputation within the fintech industry as a public relations firm with all kinds of connections within this space. If you want to get your message out, And if you want to understand better who's available out there in the fintech space that might solve some of your needs as a credit union.
And they have a great publication. I want to give away a couple of those books on one of these because it's really good. You know, they do a good environment scan of
they do a
fintech
couple.
environment.
Are you thinking of Bankers as Buyers?
Yes,
yeah.
Bankers as Buyers. Yep.
Another one that I will tout is their trade show directory. It's a great one-stop shop to think of figure out all the different things. And of course, we're in the middle of the height of trade show season. Just knowing all the different places the people are convening. It's I've had multiple people ask me for copies of that one.
Yeah, it's there's a lot. So yeah, go check them out. And we thank them because they're the sponsor of this. So when we get to the wheel, if you are a vendor, unfortunately, you cannot participate. If you work for me, you cannot participate. If your name rhymes with Barvardi, you cannot participate, or Polind, either one of those. Otherwise, please put your name in. I see lots of names going in. Very exciting. Let's get on with the show. So I'm going to talk just a little bit about what I'm seeing, and I want to give the premise for why I put this together. So one of my jobs when I facilitate a large meeting, whether it be the board, or in this case, I was facilitating with over 50 credit unions at the CUNA CEO Council, and I'm gonna say it was the Broadmoor or something like that in Phoenix. Maybe no, Biltmore. It's a subsidiary of the one in Asheville. And one of the things I have to do is sort of get the group talking, right? Because that's the most important thing. And cracking the ice when you have CEOs in the room, from the size of, state employees, North Carolina, all the way down to, $50 and $100 million credit unions with 15 employees is very difficult, because not everybody has the same needs or wants or understands how, it's just a lot of different variances. But what I did discover is the one thing that brings everybody together is fraud. And so a lot of times I'll sort of default to that, Glenn, to try to get people talking. And so I kind of threw out a few things. How's everybody doing with this? Did we, the rates were cut just before, so I thought I'd throw that out there. It didn't really get a lot of discussion. It wasn't enough of a move to concern anybody. But man, when I brought up fraud, and I got to say, this has been happening to me over and over again as I go from place to place. I did the same thing at a Volcor meeting. I did the same thing in a few other places. And the thing I thought was interesting, Glenn, was it didn't matter whether you were a 15-employee credit union or a bazillion-employee credit union. Everybody had the same problems, but not exactly the same. So here's what I think is happening and why we're doing this. And Melinda and I were having a good discussion about this too. So AI has been introduced since October of 2022. And we're seeing such an uptick in fraud because fraud is a function of programming, and it's also really a game of numbers, right? So if you want to try to, say get into a credit union and you're going to go through their LinkedIn and you're going to sort of figure out the voices, or pardon me, the emails of various people, you're going to try to hit a bunch of them, and you're going to hit a bunch of them with different emails and different things, because it's like a little like throwing spaghetti against the wall. Now, up until just recently, it's always been pretty easy to spot those. You look and go, yeah, I never, we don't use this payroll service, or yeah, I don't believe ADP would, misspell the word, credit. And there was a lot that was sort of good telltale signs. But what's happened now is the advent of AI has created, I think, a three-prong approach for the bad guys. The first one is they now can write emails not only that are spelled and grammatically perfect, but they can go a step further. And we heard about this I've heard about this at a couple conferences, which is they can go and collect your emails, the type of emails that you send out, they can feed them to an AI, and then the AI, after seeing 5, 6, 7 of these for the members, they can basically emulate that in a way that's very difficult for a member to discern the difference on. So that's the first prong of what they're doing. The second prong is that the AI models that are out there, we tend to think, Glenn, of like ChatGPT. ChatGPT is running on God knows how many computers. I'm pretty sure every time they turn it on, the lights dim in the entire earth, right? And so you tend to think of it like, oh, big players like OpenAI or Microsoft are the only ones that can do this. But the smaller models that can run on a local PC are very, very capable, extremely capable. And because they're so capable, they're able to use them, and they're able to do what's called unlocking them. And it turns out it's pretty simple to unlock them, which is to remove the guardrails. The guardrails are what prevents it from telling you how to make a nuclear bomb, or telling you, or basically being a willing accomplice in a crime or something like that. Once they remove those guardrails, then they can use it to monitor their activities. In other words, one of the things that you have to do when I'm trying to break into someplace, if I were to do that, is you need to see which emails they clicked on, which emails they read, which emails worked, which emails didn't. And then you have to make some determinations based on that and what you'll send next. It's a game. In this case, they can actually have the AI do that. And what that means is, instead of sending out 10 emails and trying to interact across those 10 just to get sort of one out of it, they can send out 1,000. And the AI will monitor it all. And by the way, these toolkits are being sold on the black web or the dark web right now. You can go out and buy them, as well as the AI to go with it. It's all one package. So that's the second thing that it's really enabling for them.
I was going to ask about that. So this is a freely available on the dark web. This is not this is not a mail order, a legitimate mail order you can do. I mean, if you're,
But you can download, you don't need to go on the dark web to download a model and do it yourself. You can download a model today. I can show that. So like I can go in, I'll just do a little quick screen share here and show you what I'm talking about. So I can go in and I'll bring up, so this model, whoops, let me bring it up here. This model I'm about to show you is completely running only on my system. It does not go out to the web. It doesn't go anywhere else. The only place that it is running is on my computer. And you can see, here it is. So you can see, if you look, the web address says localhost. For those of you that aren't technical, that just means that that's my computer. It's running locally. The actual model itself is running right here. And so I can go in and say, help me craft an email that, to credit unions about security awareness. And it's going to fly through it. What's more important is, not only can you download these models, you can take the guardrails off of them, but you can also go through and download different models. And the thing is, you don't have to be able to win the Nobel Peace Prize in order to write these things and do this stuff. So they don't need to go sign up for ChatGPT. They have this locally, and it can run. It doesn't even have to be a super powerful computer. So that's one of the things that's a big game changer.
The piece about removing the guardrails, I mean, that would be a relatively, garden variety hacker that could do that. It's not really all that.
Well, that brings me to my third point. So no, up until just recently, removing the guardrails couldn't be done by a garden variety hacker. But a garden variety hacker plus any of these models, particularly the programming one, suddenly transforms from a garden variety hacker to a pretty darn good one without having to do anything. And that's that third piece. Once you build and get your stuff together, there's programming involved in order to sort of deal with how you're going to get into these things, what you're going to do. And it has turned all of what we used to call script kiddies into John Dabbs is here, and his picture is distracting me because he looks like Topher Grace. Sorry, John. It's just the way you're looking at me. It takes any garden variety hacker, what we used to call script kiddies, and it turns them into pretty much full-fledged, programming hackers that are now capable of doing stuff that they never could have done, and they only could have bought from the dark web or got help from somebody. And so what's happening as a result of this, you're welcome to bring the presentation back up whenever you're ready, Madison. What's happening as a result of this is not only are we seeing a massive uptick in fraud, but it's not running in the waves it used to, Glenn, where you kind of see things either start in the West Coast and work their way towards the East Coast or vice versa. Like ATM fraud kind of does that as the people move along with it. Instead, it appears we have actors in every region trying new things against all the different credit unions. What's he say? What you didn't know is I am John Stamos? No. Yeah, there you go. Avatar. There you go. So, but yes, it's a perfect avatar. Well done. But the point is that they don't have to, we're seeing all this come from all these different directions at once. And that led me to, I was watching people in that meeting, Glenn, when Hope from, I forget, your friend from Illinois remembered her, but she was mentioning some fraud. And I was watching CEOs of 30 billion plus credit unions just writing as fast as they could in their little notebooks as to what she was saying. And that's because this is a pervasive issue. It doesn't matter what size you are. It doesn't matter what your seg is. It's a bad response for all of us. So with that in mind,
do you think this means there's just more people in more geographies that are capable of doing this? Or
yes, that's my feeling. Yes,
so
I'm sorry.
Not just that they
I like the way you
out,
succinctly put that. Yes,
it's not just the fact that they've decided to just kind of hit the whole country at once because they can do it on a retail basis now, rather than slowly fanning out from one coast.
I think that there are people who wanted to do this that couldn't, that now can. I think there are people who were doing it but couldn't really pull off a big job, something more sophisticated, that now can. And I think that it's become far easier and far more pervasive, and the technology has sort of crossed all those boundaries. And like I said, it was easy to see in the room when we started discussing it. So I thought, what if we got some folks to tell us about the fraud? By the way, we're going to have an open discussion about this. So everybody get ready, hover over your mute buttons, because I want to hear from you. But what I'm going to do is take us through some of these things. And I know everybody's going to want to talk. So, or everybody's probably has some of these pieces. So let's move on to the next slide. So we didn't get a ton of responses, but we got enough. And I want to thank the folks that had enough. So we got 2 smaller credit unions, 2 medium size, and 1 really large credit union. So that was kind of what we had for the 5 respondents that kind of told us what they saw and what was going on. And let's go on to the next slide that gives us some more details. So the types of fraud that they reported, card fraud, which is really grown. And by the way, I am just as of yesterday a victim, and I'm pretty sure I know what happened. There was so I just drove from Colorado to Florida, and there was this one pump, and I pulled on that thing. I was worried. I tried to use tap wherever I could, but I pulled on that thing, and it just looked like it was kind of open, but the front of it, I just figured, oh, they didn't do a good job, because those open up and behind them is the computer. So I just thought, no, maybe they didn't do a good job of locking this down. But turned out that it was legit fraud, and my card was used at a check cashing center in Richardson, Texas, and they pulled almost $1,000 as of yesterday. So I'm getting all that put back and dealt with it. So we had 5 of the 5 credit unions reporting card fraud. And there's a whole bunch of different kinds that have been emerging lately. Phishing. So everybody's reporting phishing, but what's interesting is the phishing now is far more targeted. It's far more succinct and grammatically correct. And its main purpose is to get someone in the credit union to click on the link so they can get access to the network and get inside. Identity theft, account takeovers. We had 3 credit unions talk about that. Check fraud. That one is so amazing to me that check fraud is still out there. Glenn.
It's low hanging fruit. I mean, I think, again, copy or capabilities. You can replicate checks better. Washing technology to actually pull numbers off and alter them is better. And the mail service is slower, which creates new problems too.
Yeah. And then loan fraud, which was interesting, and that was as a result of online lending applications. And then there were a couple emerging types that I've discovered that weren't specifically called out, but I wanted to point them out. One that's really growing is willing participant fraud. And I think I know why, because the willing participant fraud involves like romance scams, and it's generally targeting older people. And before, it was a human and they had to spend a lot of time talking to them. But I don't know if you've seen these AI girlfriends and things online, but they're basically unlocked versions of the models that are prompted to be your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your significant other or a romantic interest. And they're actually falling in love with them and giving them their credentials. And they fight you when you call them to tell them, hey, this isn't real. It's kind of like that when a man loves a woman kind of a thing, which is crazy. The other one I've seen a lot of is this CEO fraud. I'm going to let Malin speak to this a little bit because it brought up a whole nother area. Malin, you want to talk to this one?
Yeah, I've heard of this happen in a couple of different ways. Email is the business email compromise that you mentioned, but more often I'm hearing about it now where folks would call in pretending to be the CEO. And this was happening before AI even, noisy background call saying, hey, I'm about to get on a plane right now, but I need a wire sent out. I won't be out off this plane for 4 hours. But by the time I land, I want this done, get it done, put the phone down. And this is someone pretending to be CEO calling the CFO or someone in accounting to initiate that with, a false pretense of urgency and threats to get that done. And what we're hearing more and more about now is this type of fraud using synthetic voice to really replicate CEOs. I mean, the CEOs out there, they've got YouTube videos and shareholder meeting recordings out there. There's enough data to create really high quality synthetic voice and making a very targeted attack to move very large amounts of money. You hear about these. There was a bank in Dubai, I think last year, that got hit with double-digit millions in losses through a scam like this. It's pretty scary.
Yeah, there was a credit union at my CEO conference that specifically talked about this and just barely stopped it. And it was a big credit union. It was $500,000. And you made the point. There's a couple of points to make about this. The point you made was, hey, we can all try to go get money out of the members and do it a nickel at a time or whatever. But boy, this is a much better way to get that hit, right? And so the other thing that I wanted to point out, Melinda, was, I don't know, 2017, I think is when you and I met and you came to our innovation club here in Tampa, where I am today.
Yep.
And I was working on synthetic voice even back then. I started to look at it because that's what we do in the innovation club is we try to see the emerging trends. And even back then, I was able to create a pretty good facsimile of a gentleman who was there, he was, I believe, Indian descent, but he had that very, almost like a British kind of Indian accent. And when I had it replicate, it sounded, I remember it sounding exactly like him. But that was 8 years ago, or 7 years ago. Here we are today, And you can do, and that took me, and it took me getting into a GitHub, and I had to have a fairly powerful computer. We had to wait a minute. It took us almost 20 minutes to compile it, to even get it to say a paragraph or a sentence. I remember kicking it off and then being like, okay, it's ready now. And you were like, all right, let's try it. But here we are, and it's 2024, late in the year. And this stuff is so good, it's fooling people. What happens in a year and a half at how fast this is moving? Because everything else is moving along with it. And so I think these schemes are going to, this is just the beginning of it. This is, like I said, it's the Napster era of this. I think that the synthetic voice is just going to get better and better from what I've seen. Would you agree?
Yeah, and I mean, it's not just, you made 2 points there. One is it's getting better, and it's getting faster, but it's also getting easier, right? So now, to Glenn's point, your garden variety hacker, you don't even have to be a hacker as long as you've got, Chrome or Firefox or even Internet Explorer, right? If you want, you can
go
just
to
log into the
11
website
Labs.
and do it on your own. Doesn't take a whole lot, and this is
Yeah.
only getting easier and easier every year.
I never thought about the fact that you just made, the point you made, Nolan, about, the higher the level in the organization, the more raw material you've got. I mean, you want to be out there, at the face to the organization. So you've got these recorded videos, whether they're, town halls for your own internal use, whether it's, YouTube videos at conferences.
Yep.
That's the template right there to create the sound print. And again, this was tying back to your presentation. The thing that I personally, the reason I think you won is it just simplified the whole proposition so strongly that you pretty much laid out A, the ability to recognize someone's voice, B, the ability for some other person to claim they were you, and then it didn't work. But then C, you actually went to the next step of making a version of your voice through, I don't know exactly how you did it, but some type of generative AI. Sounded like you to me. I was fooled, but your system picked it up. So, I mean, and again, I think it's that typical arms race, right? I mean, they're going to keep getting better at it, and your system's going to get better at it to keep stopping them at the gate.
Absolutely.
Right.
And, as quick as they've become today, it's interesting. My original intention was to create a clone live on stage, but then I realized like 7 minutes to get it Finovate. Even the AI is not that fast enough to do the whole demo and create a clone. So we had to come up with a pre-created clone, but still it was pretty quickly available. I mean, if I had an extra minute or two on stage, like 9 or 10 minutes, I would have had time to create a clone from scratch on stage. So that's how easy it's getting.
I could do it right now. I think I could get it done before the end of this. So let's move on to the next slide. And so I thought those were good points. So what was the financial losses just from 5 credit unions? Holy moly. Look at that number.
And again, a couple of those are under 100 million. So I'm sure it's weighted toward the larger ones, but
yeah,
on a per asset basis, that's a big number.
It's massive. I mean, these numbers, by the way, Melinda, I think you said that it was on par to triple for this year, right? Wasn't that the number we pulled out of something?
I've spoken to a few of our clients, and anywhere between 2x to 5x compared to 3 years ago in terms of fraud losses. It's kind of the range I'm hearing. And what's also interesting is, when we started providing our services for authentication right around the pandemic time, like for the first few years, the biggest interest was, hey, we're overwhelmed with call volume and we want to break that down and make calls efficient, or we want to improve member experience. But I'd say in the last 12 months, the most common request is, hey, we have fraudsters calling in. They have all the answers to every security question that happens multiple times a day, even if we're a small credit union. That's really ticked up tremendously.
Yeah. So let's move on to the next one here. So what did we see, from the emerging trends? I've already talked about the willing participant. We've talked about the CEO one, and the CEO one I thought was one of the more interesting ones, because what Malin said that really caught my ear. Well, first of all, right away, everybody could take this away right now. You can do this right now, no tech needed. Take all your senior staff and make a code word. everybody take your senior staff and make a code word. I don't know. You know how we used to carry around those little cards in our phone or whatever? They had like the numbers for the DR. Make a code word, call it mushroom, whatever it is. And that way, if anybody has any concerns, they can ask for the code word. So that's step one. Anybody can do that, do it now. The follow-up though is that's only going to work, you know, for a small amount of people. We can't have every employee in the credit union have a code word and everybody else remember it. So Malin was talking about, there you go, security word of the day. I love it. Red canoe. Yeah, and that's a great point. But text, I actually just worked on, I did a demonstration with Roger and I were going through it where I could steal text. So maybe find another way to send it, use something more secure. But the thing that Malin was bringing up that I thought was important is we may need to start using this on internal calls, a product like Illuma Labs. And the one that really stuck out to me that you were mentioning, Malin, was the help desk, because that's a big target, is their help desk, to try to get them to unlock a password or do something. You want, and so your product now, what you're starting to work on is not only will it tell you if a member's a member, but it'll tell you if you're speaking to the actual employee, right?
Yeah, and I mean, if you think back about a year, the MGM Grand breach
Yep.
that hit the news, that was a help desk breach.
Yep.
One account gets you privileged access, keys to the kingdom. You can do, depending whose account you broke into, you can do almost anything, as opposed to average member accounts don't hold as much imbalanced. So the damage you can cause is very limited. We've seen an uptick in interest for help desk authentication solutions, not as high as I would have expected it to be post the MGM breach, but we still continue to get more and more inquiries and requests. And we have a couple of clients implementing our solution for internal help desk authentication, particularly for password resets.
Yeah. And there was supposed to be a third one on this page, and it looks like it got cut off. So, but I love that, Lynn, and I think people should do that. I think the more transparent, the quicker you can do it. I can't say it enough. Malin is worth his weight in his. I mean, I'm not trying to just because he paid, literally right now. I think it's worth its weight in gold. The third one is this idea of regulatory fraud, and it was George Rudolph from Pennsylvania State Employees that was sharing with me that they take ChatGPT or some model, they look through your e-disclosure, or they look through your holds, and they find some hole in what you do, and then they exploit that by doing legal business moves, and it takes you time to clear it out because you can't just go change your rules. You have to put it through the laws and the bylaws and the board and the NCUA and all those things. That one I thought was very interesting. And there's another one, and I want to call this legal fraud, but I haven't come up with a good name for it yet. But the other one is in the willing participant fraud. And this one maybe isn't about romance. Let's just call it where the member thinks that they're getting some sort of deal. It's typically older members, which we have plenty of in our membership. The member thinks they're getting some sort of deal, and that deal involves them making an investment or something, and they're trying to get the money out of the credit union, and they legit believe it. And then something happens, and then they get the money out because you can't talk them out of it. And then the other side says, well, I never got it, even though they did. And they go, your credit union's preventing you again. And then they use ChatGPT to generate what looks like a full on and is legit legal notice or legal, sort of a motion or whatever. Something like they're going to be sued. They're going to sue the credit union for not completing this. And what that does is it's going to wind up going nowhere. Well, you know what it does, Glenn? It buys them time to make 2 more hops on the ACH. Because really, hope you enjoyed the balloons. Really, you only, Glenn, if you can get past 2 hops, what are the chances of getting the money back from an ACH?
Oh, I see what you're saying. I mean, yeah, that's, again, and we're talking ACH. We're not even talking real-time payments. So
right.
They're gone.
But the more hops you can get behind it, the more likely you are. So I thought that was very interesting as well. And I see a lot more use cases, and Lynn and I were discussing them. For example, I think we're going to have to step up doing outbound calling for large transfers. And wouldn't it be nice if Malin could create a system that just calls the member, asks a question, and also confirms their voice so that when they talk, because the issue we have now is, what's the first thing the bad guys do? They change the phone number, and they're learning, by the way, they now know not to do it and then do whatever they're going to do right away. Now what they're doing is changing it, let it sit for a while, let it become sort of on record. So it defeats the, hey, I just changed the email, I just changed the phone number, and now I want to transfer 50 grand. No, we changed the email first. Let it sit for a while. Then we change the phone number, let that sit for a while. And then we make the transfer. And that defeats a lot of the sort of expert programming we put in place to find these things as trends. You want to say something, Melinda?
I was going to say we already do outbound authentication, and that actually started pretty early within our client base because members who sign up for a smoother verification process, when they got called back, they said, well, I just signed up for something like this. Now you call me back and you're asking me 20 questions about what we do. So it was a convenience aspect, but we ended up stopping a handful of wire frauds because most of our clients use outbound calls as a factor to verify wires, and they saw that the voice print did not match, although the phone number was, the account was taken over through a SIM swap or a SIM clone. So that's a level of protection that we've been providing for a while.
Yeah, and I think there's even more that can be done there. I really do.
Yeah.
I think there's more things that we can figure out. So what could we do? I think these are the things we're talking about. But before I get to this, there are a lot of people that maybe wanted to respond and were concerned about sharing the data. We're working on that. I really want to try to make this a more regular sort of occurrence, this fraud. I call it Fraud-A-Palooza. But let's hear from the crowd. So if you are interested in sort of, you saw a recent one that doesn't fall into a category or see something emerge you think everybody should know about, go ahead and raise your hand and we'll get you unmuted so you can talk about it.
I'm curious, John, on that prior slide.
Or actually put it in the chat because I can't see all the people at once. Just go ahead and mention, you'd like to talk.
On that prior slide, John, you had willing participant fraud. Is that becoming an industry accepted term, or is that just kind of your terminology for it?
I think it's an industry accepted term.
Okay.
Yeah. I
like
pulled it out of an article Malin sent me from Forbes, I think it was.
I don't like that term because it seems to almost imply that the person's in on the scam. I mean, there's always that, that issue of friendly fraud and first person fraud. It's always tricky. I mean, I just think of it as credit push, but as your point, that's not necessarily even what we're talking about because it could be an ACH as well, which is not necessarily even a push. But yeah, it's basically, it's scams that have been going on forever, but now we just have new ways to actually access the money.
Yeah.
And I'd say, I think of willing participant fraud as, one way to, rob a credit union is, go into a branch with guns. That doesn't work very well. The other way is, try to take over an agent over the phone, right? By essentially compromising the human protection. But that's getting tougher now too, through technology, better training. The weakest link is the member, right? So you trick the member to authorize a transaction on your behalf, which was the girlfriend scam that John mentioned, where the members got access to their accounts. If you can convince them to do something that you'd like them to, then they already meet all the security requirements and they come through. And we're seeing that happen more and more.
Yeah, so I'm interested in hearing this one. Chris, can you tell us which credit union you're from and share the RDC fraud you just had? And then we also got a fraud log, which I thought was interesting, and we were going to talk about that. But go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, so I'm from Premier Credit Union. We're in Central Iowa. I'm just going to read this because I wasn't involved in, I'm not really involved in fraud on our side, but deposited checks via RDC and used Cash App to transfer funds. When the checks were returned, the funds were gone. Big loss from cashing the fraudulent checks, they used a stolen ID, our ITMs, and a branch to cash 4 checks in about 90 minutes. So they just railroaded everything through before. And I'll be honest, like we're working on improving our technology. That's coming with the core conversion where this type of stuff is less likely to happen. But we don't have a lot of ability to detect some of this stuff where everything's legitimate. It's just, it's legitimate other than the person, right? Like the ID is there, everything matches up. But they skirt around the controls we have in place and get it through in, 90 minutes. They're running around between different locations.
It's curious too. What you just said is very interesting because what I was, so take Cash App, for instance. You could almost build a kiting scam out of stringing a bunch of these together because they all have that instant debit transfer like Venmo. So you could basically chain a bunch together. And Melissa and I just experienced this with Square Payroll. So let's say that you hit Square Payroll and it's connected to one of your business accounts at your credit union. They try to move out, I don't know, money to pay. They pretend they're employee or they get paid. It's going to give them that money. Then Square is going to go after you until they get it, right? But in the meantime, they could then take that money and move on to Cash App or something and turn it more and launder it once more by pushing it through. So, yeah, it's out. And Thomas is asking, is there anyone successfully getting funds sent back to Cash App there from a fraud scam? It sounds like these guys were, because you said they ran it that way, right, Chris?
You're back on mute, Chris.
We did not recover anything.
How much was it? Are you able to share?
16 from fraudulent checks. That's what it says here. 16,000. So yeah, I don't know.
Wow. But I mean, even then, a lot of Koreans are still trying to federate their holds. And I think this whole idea of doing this one-to-many thing is very interesting.
I noticed, Chris, earlier you put in the chat, you're seeing a lot of RDC-based fraud, and this is an example of it. But I'm curious because I haven't seen the statistics broken out this way. Do you know, or you have an estimate of how much of the check fraud you're seeing is directly through RDC?
I can ask. It's going to be an ugly number, though. It's going to be a lot of it.
It's the majority. Yeah,
I would guess. Yeah, I don't think we have standard card fraud like everybody else that I think is probably within reason, but I think our RDC fraud has gone up quite a bit, and I think we've got decent controls in place, especially on new members. But like this one, again, I'm guessing it's a member that's been here for 10 years. It's an established person, and they just got taken advantage of.
And that was another thing too, Chris, and Melinda and I were talking about, is that we were discussing the idea that we need to register, and this came out of a couple different countries. Melinda mentioned one. I know in Israel now that as part of signing up for a bank or a financial institution, you have to provide your voice for voice verification. And facial recognition as well. And that's something Melinda and I were talking about, because that's a skill we have, is the home banking registration process, which is generally where you would do this during onboarding, although you could do it in the branch too. We were discussing that as well. We were also discussing bilingual and how that's growing quickly with AI as well. The other languages. We're going to have to do our thing here in a minute, but before we do, Tanya Holland was one of the people who was gracious enough to really talk to us a bit about what was going on. I wanted to see if she would be willing to go through, talk a little bit about her call log that she shared. She has not been responding, but I wanted to see.
Okay, can you hear me now, John?
I can. Hey, how are you?
Yeah, hey, good, thank you. Yeah, we started keeping a log a while back, and we use it to inform our retail team so they know, because not every employee knows what's happening in another branch, right? And it's been a really valuable tool that we can give them monthly insight into what's happening. And the value is is that when a situation presents that they might not have experience with, they have been reading about this, and we have really been able to lower our actual losses and prevent a lot more from actually taking place through just that constant education. But as you probably saw, and it's across the board, it's all the standard romance scams and fictitious checks. And if you start working here, we'll send you $1,200 to buy desk equipment. It's the Bitcoin and all those things that we're seeing as well.
Yeah, the Bitcoin scams are growing as well, which is a whole nother issue. And yeah, and this education piece is, this education piece was a big part of it. We're going to see if we can show it. I know we were cleaning it up, and Melissa's just taking a quick look, but this is where, like I said, we're going to have to fight fire with fire, which means fighting AI with AI, which also means things like the more transparent, the better, the voice authentication. There's other biometrics now out there that can grow into this. It's going to be this balancing act. But the things that really surprised me, and this is where I'm very concerned about this, we are just at the very start of this. We are right at the beginning. In other words, what we're seeing now compared to what's coming, because the people who are playing with it now are still early adopters. Once it gets out there to, where we see it cycle down into the actual much more aggressive criminal units, and they really start, it's going to be like, there was a hacking explosion in the 2012s. And that's because the tools finally got good enough that other people could use them without having to write like binary firmware, updates, which are only for very capable and established programmers. And it sort of got down to where there were toolkits. One of the things, you can go online right now and buy a ransomware toolkit, which I went and looked on the other day on the dark web. You can also hire a hitman. Turns out it's not real though. So it's very curious how all of this is kind of coming together over time. And to your point, Tanya, getting the rest of the staff to at least know or have that sixth sense when something's fishy, I think is going to definitely be around the training. What I'm worried about is, can we keep up with it? And particularly when we're getting hit from all sides. Different credit unions are experiencing different things. And that's why I thought it'd be a good use case of this town hall to sort of do that. So does anybody have any fraud, before I move on, that isn't in any of the categories that I've mentioned that you want to bring up that you're seeing? And by the way, I purposely excluded sort of ATM fraud. That's a whole nother animal that I'm going to do a whole nother town hall on. But any other ones? Anybody? Hey, Russ Peters, from what prompted you guys to do the secure word of the day? Just curious.
Okay, yeah. So, can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay. We have, our main issue was not, we're growing. Not everybody knows everybody anymore. And so, we had an issue of people walking in behind someone, that looked like an employee or whatever, but wasn't.
Oh yeah, like drafting, and that what they call it?
Right, drafting, yeah. And then also, so it started out that way. Like, we just needed a security word of the day sent to everyone. So if you're ever unsure who someone is, just ask them what the security word of the day is, and you're one step closer to assuming that correctly that that's an employee, right? So, and then what we do now is when people call in to the help desk to change a password or whatever, any of those high risk things, we always ask for the security word of the day.
Huh. So it just had like a lot of use cases.
A lot of use cases, yeah. We've really been leveraging it. We use a software called One Call, I think it is.
And One Call is the thing that sends the text out to all the.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And we also load that up with all the words and all the employees and so forth.
That is really cool.
Yeah, it
Love
actually is working out a lot better than I thought it was. When I first heard about it, I thought it was kind of hokey, but it's a cool idea.
Well, and it's one of those things, it seems to be a gift that just keeps on giving. Because this is not going to go away.
Right.
Now the key is to use Milan's tool to tell if the person saying the code word is who they are. Which wouldn't be all that hard, you know. I mean, it's going to tell who you are either way, but yeah, very interesting. Well, we're coming to the end of our time. We got a good full wheel here. I love it. Is anybody else, just before we spin, does anybody else want to get their name in the hat here? If you joined late, you have to be a member of a credit union. All you got to do to get your name in here, we're not doing anything with your information, is just put your name in. There you go. We got one right there. We'll add her. Put your name and your credit union in, and we'll add you in. So if you did put your name in and for some reason we missed you, you don't see your name on the list, let me know right now. I'm going to give you just a minute to see if anybody else wants to do that. There you go. Another one. So I'm going to throw something out there while we're doing this. Anybody else that wants one? So I have been thinking about creating a service that would allow us to report these frauds and how they work without providing any member data. And Melinda and I were talking about this. If you think that would be something you'd be interested in, I don't know if it's free. I haven't sort of figured it out, but it'd be a place where you could go look at other people's fraud to see like what kind of fraud schemes there are and compare them to others that's not related to banks or other third-party industries, but without any member data. So if you think you'd be interested in that, feel free to put your name in or feel free you could just put the number 1 in the chat. We save the chats. We'll go through and collect your information because we're doing some surveying. So we're very interested and it would be a website that you would join and you could look up other fraud. All right, Amber, do you want to be the one to press the button or you want me to do it?
All you, John.
All right, here we go. We're going to see who gets this $100 gift card. And you ready? You get the wheel and go. Here we go. So yeah, if you're interested in participating in Fraud Watch with us, we think we create a website. We're kind of looking into it right now. Just put a 1 in there. Russ from Red Canoe. Hey, and a participant. Awesome.
Holy cow. Thank you very much.
You win. Yeah. And do you have any idea what kind of gift card you want?
Visa.
Yeah, there you go. Okay. That would be the best kind.
Well,
Yeah.
first you would ask him the secret word of the day.
Yeah, what's
Yeah,
the
there you
word
go.
of the day? So we don't know if it's you or not. And Melinda, if people want to talk to you, I'm assuming you pop your email in or Amy's or whatever you want to do.
I'll
And,
drop that in here.
yeah, and congratulations. I cannot emphasize enough and Melinda, I think would say this too, whether it's him or some other service like this, you got to get this going if you don't have it, because this game it's going to escalate quickly and exponentially. That's my opinion based on what I'm seeing. And congrats to him and his team. And thank you all for joining. And thank those people who were willing to share. Tanya, thank you so much. And thanks Russ and everybody that participated. And we'll get some information about Fraud Watch out there. I'm glad to see some folks are interested. We'll talk to you soon.